Salute omnes, I am Ruminous, and today we are doing a review for Super Mario World. I know I beat this a long time ago, but, again, things got away from me, so deal with it. Super Mario World's plot follows the standard formula of Bowser unable to comprehend personal space and curfews and keeping Toadstool way past their bedtime. The Yoshis are also held captive, so Mario has to go get everybody for bedtime and murder some angry clouds in the process. The world is quite imaginative and fantastical, creating levels and areas that have endless possibilities and enemies. Our purpose is to find Toadstool, who is stolen again, and the Yoshi gang, who is egged up, de-eggify the dinos, and rescue the princess. Or maybe not? Why is her head so big? Super Mario World is an intense platformer with 96 possible exits. The time to complete is entirely dependent on the skill, intuition, and focus of the player. This time around, having played up to 100% multiple times took me about 5 hours in all. I'd imagine a newcomer may need about 10 to 15 hours to find all the secrets and suffer the superstar levels. The Ice World in particular is ironically a hellscape that sparked an unrelenting fire of rage in my heart. The controls in the game are limited to run, slide, jump, glide, and spin. With power-ups and Yoshi, some of these get added or new effects. However, every command works when pressed, and there's never a time when I noticed that the game denied the controls, except when I died. Obviously, the game screwed me, it's not my fault. Throughout the game, the controls work consistently and without error, which is needed for these stupid fish levels. The game gives plenty of lenience by allowing the player to cancel, change, and repeat actions immediately and infinitely. For running, there will be a slight slide to turn around, but it only takes a second, and jumping allows an immediate change of momentum. The player can control their height and cancel a jump or flight in an instant if needed. The player can spam the jump, spin, and fire booger controls to the heart's content without any limit. The player has plenty of options to get extra lives and will have to revert to the last save point if they run out, but restarting a level only takes about 5 seconds after death. It quickly allows the player to get back into the action and die to the stupid spinning shell again. For most actions, the player has to wait until the current action is completed before repeating it, although most independent actions can be repeated immediately. Once the action is done, the player can immediately redo it without any planned or unintentional lag. The actions are practically required throughout the game. Since it is a platformer, jumping and running are constantly used, although attacks and spin are up to the player. The levels can be mostly skipped by flight or enemies evaded easily, even though the stupid Koopa deserves a butt slam into the netherworld. The game gives plenty of opportunity for the different power-ups and actions, and the secrets demand frequent use of all these actions. The verbs are all useful, although I typically rarely use the spin jump unless I needed to pulverize an enemy quickly. There are also commands to control the camera that I believe are generally useless, as the view is large enough to see and avoid hazards, but maybe new players will find them much more useful than I. Since I've played this game, Robert, how many times? 17 pentillion times. Outside of beating the castles, getting the colored blocks, and saving Yoshi, the game never takes away control of the camera or the verbs. The player has full autonomy to go to whichever level and do whatever actions. Even when text prompts do come up, they can be rejected pretty much immediately and are so infrequent that they are really not a problem. One of the major pulls of Super Mario World is its autonomy. The player is given free reign to explore the world and beat the game however they wish. The game moves pretty fast. Mario apparently is trained to fix plumbing at the speed of light and can traverse whole levels within about a minute or so, as long as he does not fall into one of the many abysses. Why is Mario World so rife with endless pits and bloodthirsty fish? Mario runs left to right and jumps about the entire height of the camera's view. Despite his speed, he is easy to control and his movement is simplistic and predictable. The view is a 2D side-scroller / side profile with a static camera fixed on Mario at the center. The view will give a little bit of the ground, but not much. Just enough to see the endless pits or pools of lava. It will give an equal view of the left and the right, about 10 walking steps in either direction, and it will give a decent height above to see the endless rain of hammers. The static camera is fixed on Mario in the center, although there are commands to shift it more to the right or the left, yet Mario does need to stand still to make this happen. The camera works well for the game, and the view is more than enough to react to whatever new jerks decide to appear on screen. The growth comes in multiple sections: the intensity of the platforming, the variety of the scenery, the amount, size, and homing of the enemies, and the complexity of secrets. The secret pathways are always told to the player with the red levels, and generally they are pretty simple to figure out, as the pattern is to look for strange walls or ceilings. The enemies will gain new attacks, like the Hammer Bros deciding to have a clearance sale towards the end of the game, which helped make some of the levels more challenging towards the end. The bosses are pretty easy throughout the game, but will change their attacks and openings, so at least there is some variety there. Overall, the game is fitting, predictable, and never outrageous. The superstar levels are bonkers at times, but that is still expected from the challenge area. The game does well to start small and give a good base, then slowly ramp up each of the aspects of growth over time to make the player constantly learn and adapt to the new levels or investigate the areas for new pathways. The growth comes in pieces and rarely includes changes to multiple sections at once. Each area of the game will have about 5 regular levels and 5 secret levels or shortcuts. The levels are consistently about a minute long but become more dense with enemies, traps, and general shenanigans in the later levels, but it slowly increases these threats to Mario's mustache so that the player gets used to it and can hone their skills for the infinite wizards in Bowser's Castle. These gentlemen are the scum of the earth. The game is fairly difficult but can be cheesed with a cape and blue Yoshi if needed. When playing normally and not farming equipment, it will be a challenging platformer towards the end, but the game does give plenty of lives, checkpoints, and power-ups throughout the game to help out. For struggling players, there is a level designed to get capes, lives, and a Yoshi, and the Star World is a good way to skip through sections of the game. The difficulty does not become an obstacle until about 75% of the way through, where brute force will no longer work, despite the football punks hacking into the game and rampaging through the levels, but there will be a need for some skill and platforming and timing. The secret levels, primarily the superstar levels, can be brutal and definitely prevent the average players from beating the levels legitimately without Blue Yoshi. Normally the levels are designed so that the player has enough time to react to hazards even at a sprint, but there are some levels and situations that are based on luck or guessing, and it can be frustrating to lose all of Mario's equipment over not knowing which stupid track to use. It is rare, but this can be frustrating and annoying to deal with. The game is humorous, bright, lively, varied in color and setting, and consistently changing and challenging throughout, and so it is incredibly sustainable. Players who are not good at platformers may give up towards the end or in the secret levels, but I feel like the general player will be inclined to continue on as the game is simple enough and fast enough that death is not a deterrent. Because of its accessibility and retrying and the atmosphere, most players should have no problem in being engaged enough to complete at least the main game. The story is as weak as it usually is. Bowser napped the princess, and now Red Plumber and Green Plumber must pummel the spiky turtle with toys until he gives up. Each time a castle is destroyed, there will be 2 to 3 sentences about how Mario is closer to the end goal, but they hardly expand on the story or give any sort of impact. The music in the game is catchy and reminiscent of typical Mario games. Most songs are 15 to 30 second loops, but they work well enough and are generally lively and upbeat to give a happy mood while the player dies repeatedly to gang violence in the cosmos. The tunnels, caves, and castles all have scary music to fit the tense theme, but it's not actually scary or horrific, just intense. The sounds are ludicrous, but fantastic. Like the world, the sounds are hyperbolic and unrealistic, but they are cool and sound good. The slams are earthquakes, the pops are balloons, and the jump is like a cartoon spring. The sounds are a delight to listen to and do not overshadow the music or become annoying easily. The game's mechanics are incredibly reliable. Standard enemies will die in a single hit, anything with armor or power-ups will take another jump, later levels will have more hazards and traps. All bosses take 3 stomps to kill, except for Bowser who takes about 6, although he has 3 phases to match that number. There is always more than enough time to beat the levels, and there's always enough coins, power-ups, and extra lives to help the player survive the more difficult levels. Each area will require about 5 levels, will have secret shortcuts, and will end with a castle. Despite the changes in enemies, locations, interactable objects, and requirements for secrets, the core gameplay behaves the same. Nothing feels unfair, unfitting, or unbalanced. The game has a few manipulative mechanics, but not many. To make the game easier, the player can activate colored blocks and unlock secret pathways, but most of them will just block off hazards. If the player beats the superstar levels, they can select to change the overworld and enemies to have an autumn theme, which is real nice. For the random blocks with the power-ups will change type depending on what Mario already has. Small Mario will always get mushrooms, but Shroomy Mario will either get a flower or a cape. The changes in the world cannot be reverted once they are done, but they honestly don't help out enough to make the game too easy, and the power-ups help keep it a bit more challenged by not constantly giving the more beneficial effects until the player learns to not run into the Goombas. The game provides a few assistives to help the player along. There is a second slot for reserve power-up in Mario's overalls, which the player can activate at will, but the power-up will automatically be released when Mario gets hit to help get some armor back. When Mario gets hit, he will also have some invulnerability frames to again give him some armor to the player and run through the onslaught of ghosts. Contrastly, most enemies do not have iframes and can be stun locked to death if the player is good enough with the bounces. The game will give an extra life after 100 coins, after a matching game with 100 bonus points. I don't know what these are called, I'm just going to call them bonus points, and after getting a sweet murder combo with successive jumps or star powers. Some of these are random and guessing, which helps limit the players cheating the system, while others take skill, again making sure that the game is not too easy. To balance the assistives, the game also grants plenty of detrimentals with the hazards and the enemies. Enemies may not have iframes after getting hit, but many will be invulnerable while attacking, making them some real buttheads when in tight spaces. Some enemies will also be completely invulnerable or continuously respawn to shade shave Mario's mustache, and so this bridge is a real nightmare. The fish haunt my dreams. Some bosses will have iframes after a hit, or get faster or more aggressive to help make these pathetic goons have some value. Seriously, the bosses are hardly a challenge, unlike this terrifying tidal wave of fish. The secret paths are generally also shortcuts, but they come with increased difficulty, so the player really has to choose what they are willing to suffer through. There are a fair bit of guidings to help the player along. In the overworld, many secret paths are easy to see, and the game will have a radioactive red circle instead of a yellow one to show that there's indeed a secret exit. The levels all move from left to right, but the secrets in the sky and the pipes often have some landmark, color, or camera shift to show that they exist. If Yoshi or a cape will be needed, nearly every single level will have them somewhere, noting that the equipment may be more than just weaponry to murder the turtles. There are dotted, colored lines to indicate colored blocks that can be activated, and often tall cliffs or secret enclaves, which will be either barely visible or have a string of convenient blocks to tell the player that these areas can be accessed. Since the game is fairly old and has maybe half a page of text, it relies on intuitive design quite heavily. Some mechanics and controls are directly stated, but most the player will have to decipher. The player can squeeze through small gaps either as Small Mario or as Big Mario if crouching after a run. Roshi will get different power-ups if he eats different types of shells, the player can extend the flight with special commands, the Star Road is helpful in skipping sections of the game, or just the game itself entirely. Most of the power-ups, secrets, tricks, special commands, enemy attacks, bosses are never taught directly, but are given enough room in their introduction for the player to learn and experiment on their own. The game doesn't really have any thematic mechanics, as it's just 110% bonkers. It makes no sense why anybody would ever go outside if there were floating piranha plants able to eat a mushroom-augmented man whole. But yet, here we are. The game is nonsensical, and that's its theme. It leans into the cartoonish nature of things and delivers with the absolute insanity of whatever the hell this is. There are no rules, no logical connections, just a man in overalls eating flowers so that he can burn down the houses of these football players who didn't make the draft. People love this game for many reasons, but one of mine is because it is absolutely disconnected from reality and does its own thing. It is thematic in the sense that there is no sense. The game's tutorial does have a bit of text, but all the lessons are entirely optional and marked with very distinct boxes that I just now realized are supposed to be speakers and not basketballs. This game has giant gerbils with sunglasses. It's not such a ridiculous assumption, don't blame me. Not all of the game is told by these floating boomboxes, but the very basics are. Otherwise, the game uses very strict level design to teach the basic rules. Turtles have a strict no touching policy. The levels will tell the player when to jump and duck. Most enemies will ignore the plumber and just keep going until they head off screen. The first few levels offer plenty of open space to play with the controls and small gaps to practice the jumps. The game does superbly in teaching the mechanics and the controls and giving autonomy to the player to figure it out and use the in-game help if they so choose. The UI and UX are well crafted with the use of colors and shading. There's a basic menu for starting or continuing the game, and there's enough clarity in the text and organization to navigate the menus. The saving and retrying menus are similarly made easy to read with white text against a black background. The overworld is clearly marked with contrasting and colored pathways against the background for most of the game, although some areas have only open space. The open spaces can be confusing at a glance, but there are trees and things to help show the pathways. The overlay for the lives and current power-up are clearly visible, and the overlay in the levels is likewise clear and contrasted against the background. Just like how the overworld's pathways are distinct from the untouchable background, the foreground and background in the levels are very clear. The ground is always marked with some distinguishing feature, and the background is shaded, cloudy, and somewhat translucent to make a clear difference. The player can easily read the text, distinguish what they can and can't interact with, and determine their status in an instant. The game is 8-bit with a cartoonish, otherworldly style. The colors are vibrant, and the world is filled with random hybrids of animals. Mario can perform superhuman feats, and all fish are bloodthirsty scum that need to be eliminated. The animations are all drawn sprites, but the amount of frames is fluid enough that the flow is seamless, and there's enough detail to easily differentiate the different enemies, platforms, power-ups, and so on. Despite being cartoonish, nothing feels absolutely ridiculous or weird. It is all somewhat grounded in reality, at least their reality, and simply looks like a fun place to be, despite the caterpillars who really need anger management. The game contains a few things for accessibility, but not much, and there was really only so much Nintendo could do with the tech at the time. The colors for the blocks, land, and power-ups are all vastly different, which can help with anyone struggling with color blindness. There are a few levels with short timing, automatic scrolling, lowering platforms, but Blue Yoshi can help cheat, although it's not really an accessibility, just part of the game, and does not help in the castles, forts, or ghost houses, which are often the more difficult levels. The game gives plenty of time per level, so even people with anxiety and cognition issues for quick movements can relax a bit until the swarm of floating bombs comes to end their existence. The text has contrasting outlines and a contrasting black box to help with legibility, although the size is small and the font can't be changed. For how simple the game is, there's enough to make it possible for different types of players to complete, but there would definitely be problems in the later levels for those with dexterity and reflex disabilities, although they should expect that from a platformer. For a final score, I give the gameplay a 33 out of 35, story 2 out of 5, sound 5 out of 5, mechanics 30 out of 30, tutorial 3 out of 5, UI UX 5 out of 5, visuals 5 out of 5, and accessibility 3 out of 5. Overall, I give the game a 5 out of 5. It should come as no surprise that one of Mario's most famous games is a 5 out of 5. I strongly encourage anybody who likes platformers to play this game. It has plenty of secrets, shortcuts, and varied settings to make the game fun and an enjoyable experience for multiple playthroughs. Most veterans of platformers may not find it overly challenging, but there are plenty of levels that will peel your oranges. The wacky environment and plethora of enemies are fun and enjoyable throughout the game as you go from the standard plains to the lava world to chocolate lava world. The unique power-ups and secrets can offer plenty of personal challenges, like how I refused to spam capes or Blue Yoshi in this one and got mauled in the superstar levels. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified of future videos. But until next time, walete omnes.